Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples well, it's a day that I can't complain again. I mean, the weather really isn't that bad. It's probably in the low 60s. It's kind of nice out. I'm not sweating. I'm not miserable, but I will be. I know it's going to get hot and sunny later on. I'm still not getting the really freezing winters that I'm looking for here, but I'd really be allowed if I kept complaining about what I got right now, because compared to July or September or whatever else, it's just absolutely fantastic. Back then it's a swamp of hell and completely untenable and certainly not fit for any sort of human existence. So I'm going to enjoy these little stints of cool weather while we have them. I'm going to go with them, and we're going to have a bit of fun doing this video. Real quick before I get into the car. So we came back from Sebring. We had that turkey trot race this last weekend, which was phenomenal. I mean, we used to stay at this hotel at the track, which was fine and it had its moments, but now we're all using RVs, and it has radically changed the joy of the race. I mean, instead of, hanging out at the hotel and getting mildly drunk, we're hanging out at the RVs and getting knee walking drunk, and it's just a much better experience for everyone. So great time. Didn't crash the car, which is kind of a miracle, and everything went very, very well. But enough about this. What I have today is the quick animal update. Again, sorry, don't want to jump right into the car. Why have a short video? No animals, nothing. I saw one rabbit jumped out this morning, scared the crap out of me, but then it darted off into the woods. It was still dark out, so I didn't get a good view of it, but it looked pretty evil. But fortunately, it was skittish and ran away. So other than that, I don't even hear a bird in the trees at the moment, and everything is pretty chipper on the animal front. There was a bird. But anyway, with that, we're going to dive right into this car. And this is a 1984 Buick Riviera. And I cannot tell you how pleased and happy I am to have this car today, mostly because this was one of the seminal cars of my youth. This is a car that I actually owned at one point in time. This was my second car. It replaced my beloved 79 Formula Firebird and became something that carried me through some very troubled times. So just an absolute joy for me to have one of these things and to be reviewing it now. It's a 6th generation Riviera, which is a hallowed name in the historical GM lineup. It was their first designated person and luxury coupe, interestingly enough. Came out in 1963. And it was a response to the Thunderbird, a very late response, mind you, but very worth the wait. Thunderbird had been selling fantastic when it was a 2-seat roadster sort of thing, when it was, taking it to the Corvette with ease. Then in 58, it became sort of a 4-seat personal luxury coupe thing and sold even more, and that's when GM decided it had to respond. Enter 1963, and in came the Buick Riviera, which had been used, that name before, some trim packages and also some show cars and whatnot, but never its own model until 63. And what a cool deal it was. The Riviera name is literally coastline in Italian. I guess it has Latin roots, but in Italian it basically means the shore. And the car is meant to evoke kind of a wealthy seashore lifestyle, with men in linen jackets and, belly laughing, and women with the Hermes scarves and shapely figures and designer sunglasses. And it all pretty much worked. I mean, it worked right from the get-go. And frankly, when I look at this car, I realize that it still worked all the way through 1985. Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, drove a first-gen Riviera when Star Trek was taking off. And he was a bit of a cool cat back then. You may think of Spock right now, a bunch of nerds. Well, back then he was kind of a cool character. And for him to be running around in a Riviera said something about that. Shatner probably driving a Corvette at the time, if I had to guess, or, something sort of strange. But anyway, it just was equated with sort of cool, stylish people at the time. And other than when I drove it, I think that never really changed. There were 8 generations of Riv altogether, from 1963 all the way through 1999. They only skipped 1 year, 1994, for reasons I'm sure GM could tell you. They decided instead to early release a 95 model. Maybe they wanted people to think it came from the future or something, but other than that, it was made pretty continuously until the name just went away. They flirted with bringing it back. There were a couple of show cars. Apparently the name is pretty popular in China, which really means something today. So, who knows? Maybe in the future we're going to see another Riviera come down the pipes. But this series was built from 79 through 85, and again, it just has this place that's very near and dear to my heart. I worked at a Buick store called Sunshine Buick in Naples back in 1990. I was pretty much fresh out of high school, graduated the year before, and I was a porter there at the used car lot. It was sort of my first official gig in the car business, if you will. And one day, in comes on trade this gleaming, stunning, gorgeous, bright silver with a gray quarter top 85 Riviera. Had an Astra roof, digital instrumentation, these same wire wheels on this car, the covers, and I was immediately taken. 40,000 miles. I called my dad up. I dragged him down to the store, and my dad he was a cheap, miserable bastard. Unbelievably so. The fact that I got him to buy the thing for himself, it had to have happened at gunpoint. I have absolutely no idea. Or maybe they just gave us a good deal. Either way, he bought it for him. And then a few years later, I did end up getting it passed down to me. And so I was thrilled to get this one and relive a little bit of that old magic that, I had when I was sort of a young idiot driving the thing around. This time, I'm probably not going to vomit in gas station bathrooms or parking lots, and I'm probably not going to go on 3 a.m. journeys for additional narcotics or intoxicants, on a Wednesday. So things have changed somewhat, but other than that, it's just nice to tool the thing around. I do miss those times, mostly. Well, let's have a quick look at 1984. Which to me was peak America. I don't think there's any question about that to people who lived through it. It was absolutely fantastic. There was no internet, and while that might sound like, something terrifying to the snowflakes of today, I can tell you it was just fine at the time. Absolutely fine. Nobody had cell phones. There were cell phones out there, I'm sure, but they weren't prolific. Not every nitwit on the street had a cell phone running around. It was stuff that, like stockbrokers had, and you'd see it in an episode of Dallas or something and go, wow, but it just wasn't something that was out there. So there was no social media and no intense decay of, American societal mores. It was just fantastic. There was great TV. There was widespread patriotism. There was just the right amount of technology that made it all seem a bit futuristic while still being nicely tied to the past. There were movies that made sense. The music made sense. And most importantly, there were girls with normal-sized asses. It just wasn't something that you saw like what we have today. If I could beam back to 1984 and relive it, man, I would in a heartbeat. No question at all. We get into a little bit of the events. So you had the 84 Olympics. That was a fairly big deal. They were held in Los Angeles, and they were very successful despite the Soviet Union boycotting them as a retaliation for us boycotting the 1980 games in Moscow. So a bunch of snippety, petty shit going on at the time. Guess that didn't change. But they were pretty, they're pretty, I remember them very well, actually. And in fact, Buick was a sponsor, and every 84 Buick had this little Olympic sticker on it. I, still remember that to this day. Mine didn't in 85. That was over by then. I think maybe the 83s had it too. But otherwise, it was a pretty good deal. I think the Winter Games were held in Sarajevo, and nobody boycotted those. And another way, you had gas escaped from that Union Carbide plant in India. That was probably one of the biggest news stories of the time. Killed 2,000 people while they were making some sort of insecticide insecticide, wounded or, harmed many, many more, and of course prompted all sorts of, outrageous entrails going on from there with, settlements and repercussions and that sort of thing. The Apple Macintosh came out. That was a pretty big deal at the time. People getting into personal computers, but still no obvious internet. And there was that pretty amazing Apple Mac ad. I think it first aired during the Super Bowl with the 1984 theme with some, dude flinging a hammer through a telescreen or something. It was, again, people around then don't maybe get it, but at the time it seemed like a pretty damn big deal. You had a bunch of British rockers put together a thing called Band-Aid. You had like Culture Club and Duran Duran and Phil Collins, and they came together to do a song, a really irritating song called Do They Know It's Christmas Time, that absolutely successfully made the Ethiopian famine more about the rock stars than the people in Ethiopia, so mission accomplished there. And there was some dude in California who went into a McDonald's and shot and killed like 20 people, and back then that kind of thing was front page news. Obviously, maybe it's dropped off today. Songs. What do you have on the radio? You had Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. I must have played that 1,000 times in my car, maybe 100,000. Karma Chameleon by the Culture Club. You remember Boy George. He would certainly fit right in today, but at the time we all just sort of accepted this strange thing that was on TV. They talk about the past as though we were, a bunch of knuckle-dragging Klansmen running around, doing terrible things to people. Well, we certainly had no trouble putting this bizarre-looking, lady dude up on the top of the charts when it came to popular music. So I think the 80s was a much more accepting time than people realize. You had Jump by Van Halen, which was kind of a strange keyboard-centric song that you wouldn't have expected from Eddie. Footloose from the movie with Kenny Loggins. Kenny Loggins made, a movie. Every song he did was from some stupid movie that won him a, Grammy or something. And then Against All Odds, another one from a movie, that one by Phil Collins. And then you had Hello by Lionel Richie, who was a bit of an institution in the early to mid-'80s. And I don't know why. That song Hello was, the video, which of course videos were huge at the time, was all about him creepily stalking some blind girl. It was really sort of disturbing and, like sneaking into her apartment and stuff. All very gross, but anyway, it was a pretty big hit. Movies, you had Beverly Hills Cop, Footloose, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, The Karate Kid, Police Academy, which was, just absolutely fantastic at the time. TV, Dynasty, had Simon and Simon, The A-Team, Murder, She Wrote, Dallas. I was a kid. I was 13, and I was the prime target for all of this media entertainment. So I remember all of it, absolutely all of it. There's not a song that I couldn't tell you a single current musician probably that's being played on popular radio, but back then I knew all of them. Anyway, enough of this. Let's get back into the car for a minute. We'll pretend this is a car review. So here it is. And look, this car had two sister ships, basically, the Cadillac Eldorado and the Oldsmobile Toronado. That was not new. It had sort of shared a platform with those cars for the last, so-and-so generations, but Riviera always retained the rear-wheel drive status, while the Cadillac and the Oldsmobile had very early on adopted a front-wheel drive setup. And Buick, in fact, this was their first front-wheel drive car, which came out in '79, and it exactly shared a platform with the Toronado and the Eldorado. So even while they got into it early, Buick held out for a while. It was a rare success story of downsizing. The car prior to this, the previous Gen Riv, had been a downsized car, but it was still, a 403 with rear-wheel drive, and I think it was like the Bonnevilles and Caprice Classic platform at the time. It was still a fairly big car. This one was a little smaller, and it did successfully work because it sold twice as many cars as the generation prior to this, doubled it. And I think the reason for that is fairly obvious. It's a friggin' good-looking car. I mean, Buick knocked it out of the park with this one. It, in fact, became the best-selling Riviera ever made, the 79 385s. Absolutely wasted all the other gens. And I think the reason for that is obvious. It's stunning. I mean, look, you could disagree with me, fine, whatever. This is all in the eye of the beholder. But I think Buick made a beautiful, stately car that easily outperformed the looks of the Eldorado and the Toronado that it was released with, and did a fine job of just looking terrific in any situation. In the year of its debut, it wowed people. It was Motor Trend's Car of the Year, which is interesting. You wouldn't think this was the sort of thing Motor Trend was into, but they were. It has the swoops, it has curves, it has, that Riviera thing with the elegant looking lifestyle. It has a formal roof, almost like that Cougar we did. It has sort of a beveled back end with angled up tail lamps with beautiful little subtleties like the Riviera logo in the reverse lights, in the tail lights, all surrounded by lovely little chrome trim, chrome on the edge of the deck lid, which angles down. Nice little body line in the center of the hood, beveled fenders coming up. Look at the... I just think they really nailed it. Nice big swooping quarter panel. Look at the curvature on the door where the window meets the top of the door. Lovely chrome door handles, chrome impact strips, chrome rocker panels, wire wheel covers, quarter top. I just think it absolutely looks lovely. By this year, they had integrated the rear view mirrors on the side to look a little... what's interesting is I remember these on mine. I believe they were chrome. It was kind of weird to see them as body color on this one, so I'm not sure how that worked, but there it is. You got a Riviera badge on the fender. You've got more... the light setup, the quad headlamps up front, the angled grille with the waterfall. You've got Riviera by Buick. It's special enough to not just be a Buick Riviera. It's like Buick came together to make a special thing, and it's separate from other Buicks. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 different body lines in the hood. They just absolutely nailed it. And I think the big chrome bumpers integrate well with the impact strips and the bumperettes at the front. It just really all came together. One thing that's interesting to me is the way the windshield does not have a chrome surround. It's just sort of molded in, almost European style. And then parking headlights that park underneath a little panel there, so they're hidden. But all in all, I just think it's an absolutely gorgeous car. And I think it was much better looking than the cars that it was released with. There was a convertible that came out. It was shockingly expensive, like 10 grand more than the standard one. So there weren't very many of them. They were either available in sort of a red fire mist color or white, both with red interiors. And again, I think this thing was like 13, 14 grand in 83 or 84. And the convertible was like 23, 24. So, it was significantly more money, more expensive than a Corvette at the time. There was also an S-type, sort of a hot rod version when it came out, with a bit of a stiffer suspension and black trim and a turbocharged motor, which we get into the engines later, but that was out. Then there was a T-type version, like the famous Regal, which became the Grand National. Buick did like their little sporty bits. There was a modified twin turbo, which came out in 83 with over 400 horsepower to pace the Indianapolis 500 of the same year. And that's a pretty neat car. That had to be kind of fascinating to watch, and I wish I remembered it, but I don't. I was still too young then to notice stuff like that. And anyway, there was a double X version. They called it the Riviera XX that came out in 83, and that paid homage to 20 years of Rivieras. It's hard to believe that. You look at a 63 Riviera today, and it looks like something that was around while the dinosaurs walked the earth. And this car came out only 20 years after that. And this car, it doesn't look current to me, but it was a car that's in my sphere. So I guess it just points to how old I'm becoming. Oh, God. Anyway, it continued to sell very well all the way through its final model year, 1985, and then it was replaced by a smaller Riv that got mixed reviews. I mean, there's some cult people who absolutely love it, but and you know, I like it because it was around when I was sort of into cars, and it had all this fancy touchscreen shit, and the first gen was kind of weird, and then they shortened it and made it prettier, and it was a little bit better, you know, a restyle of it. But all in all, I think this truly was the last most elegant Riviera that was ever made. The gens that came after this one, you know, they had their own special things and they were good in their own way, but nothing had sort of the stately impact that this car did. So, okay, look, let me pause for a minute. I'm going to get my crap together and then we're going to go diving into this particular car, so bear with me. So there were a bunch of birds hanging out in this tree. Never saw them. They were quiet. And there they go. So fortunately they didn't come at me. You have to forgive me if I'm a little bit convoluted today. You know, with this whole new whatever the hell, Omicron variant going around, you know, everyone's coming to a complete panic, at least those in government. And so I've doubled down on the coronavirus whiskey again. They say it could still get it despite all my, you know, the whatever's protections are all over. This thing's going to come for me and get me. It's some kind of AIDS, COVID hybrid, and, you know, probably we're all going to die. So I figured, what the hell, better have 2 helpings of the coronavirus whiskey to keep going. One thing that's interesting before we jump in the trunk of this car is, you know, you would have thought that at the time Buick would have had a hard time convincing people to switch over from traditional rear-wheel drive to front-wheel drive, but they didn't. You know, they had ads at the time showing a Buick running up a hill of ice and snow with no problem, while a Mercedes was struggling and sliding, and, you know, all that kind of shit helped. And of course the traction and, you know, the fact that it was front drive made more room inside. But I genuinely think that it was just the good looks of the car that helped Buick to sell it and to overcome the whole rear-wheel drive issue. You know, people looked at it and said, the hell with it, it is what it is. I like the way it looks. So that goes a long way to soothing people. Here in the back again, I love the taillights with the Riviera logo, the gun sight thing in them. I think that looks great. It still has a traditional flip-down license plate where you get to your gas door, you know, very reminiscent of Buick's past, and have a look inside the rather sizable trunk. Now, when I got it, it had these hideous white Buick dealer-installed mud flaps on it, and I labored over the thought of leaving them on because it really did tell the story of the car, but I just couldn't. They were too much. They were just too damn much. So there it is. I had to take them off, but I put them in the trunk. So if you want to put them back on, if you buy this thing, you can. You know, whoever owned this, it was part of the Buick Club, if the stickers on the car to be believed. So, you know, there's belts, extra hoses, you know, all this stuff that frankly over-prepared geeky guys like myself like to have or see in the trunk of a car. Also a very nicely finished trunk. You can see all the carpet extends up the sides, you know, befitting a luxury car at the time. Behind that little slit in the anyway, but up there is where the jack and the lug wrench are, and of course it's got a little, I like the way they tried to make a little donut tire look elegant and regal by covering it up, but it just doesn't have the same impact as a full-size tire would. You got your jacking instructions there, you got your wire wheel cover instructions, and then a little GM build sheet that tells you the options this car had. So all very nice stuff. Have a look under the hood. God, all this brings back. I mean, you know, this is not a car that I had to learn, I'll tell you that much. It was a piece of cake to know where everything was right off the bat, because of course I had this thing for so long. Anyway, there it is. This is a 5-liter 307 Oldsmobile engine. This is basically the engine they just finally settled on as the car went. When it first came out, God, there were actually a stunning amount of engines you could get in these things. So it was a 3.8-liter turbocharged V6, a Buick V6. It was kind of a new engine at the time, and that was out in the S-Type and the sporty versions. There was a 4.1-liter V6 that was standard in the car. If there's one out there with it, I haven't seen it. I think pretty much everyone opted for the V8. Initially, there was the 5.7 Oldsmobile, the 350, of course, which is a fine motor, and that was sort of the upgradable V8 that you could get. And then there was this 5.7 diesel, an Oldsmobile diesel, which was, of course, a converted gas engine, which was terrible, absolutely terrible. And that was available in the car all the way through 85. And I saw one of those recently, and people still hated it. So that engine was bad enough that its reputation has stood the test of time. But the 307, this one is a fine engine. All of the engines went through either 3 or 4-speed turbo hydromatic trans, which is, of course, mildly converted to make it front-wheel drive. It had independent front suspension. It had some, beams in the back that connected the rears and coil springs, and it worked pretty well. Good handling suspension in the car. And basically, in this incarnation, it's just pretty damn bulletproof. The 307, great engine. The Turbo Hydra, great tranny. Transmission, and everything worked pretty much according to plan, and much less complex for a front-wheel drive car than it could have been, including having the engine mounted in the correct, forward looking motion. So you can always tell a Buick. Oh, for the love of God, maybe I should have toned down the whiskey. You can always tell an Oldsmobile engine by that big stand-up filler cap in the front. That's pretty definitive. And anyway, there it is. So all very nice stuff. Again, pause quick. Gonna get my shit in the trunk, and then we are going to go for a spin after looking over the interior. So hold on one moment. All right. Well, again, this is just so extra special for me because of all the memories it brings back. And here it is. So here's the interior of the car. Mine was leather. This is velour. It's fine. It's it's not what I want because it's not mine, but it's good enough to bring back some memories. The door panels had all this sort of lovely velour on top. It had this fake expanses of chrome trim with pretty good speakers. I remember this car having a great stereo. Mine did, and this one does too. This big panel which gave you the power mirrors, nice setup, power locks, power seat, power windows, big pull handle here. You got lights in the door with carpet at the bottom. Here in the back, your Canadians are going to be fairly chipper. You can certainly fit 2 of them comfortably, 3 if you have to, and they have a little armrest to enjoy themselves. Also a little package shelf. You're not going to fit an infant up there, but you can try. And neat little map lights and interior lights and more speakers, and everything looking nice and proper. The seats are very supportive and lovely and interesting. Has power on both sides. The steering wheel fascinates me a little bit. I think it's original. I'm sure it's original in this car. It just strikes me as being the T-type wheel with the 3 prongs, and it's not the one mine had, kind of a fat leather grip. Just kind of interesting. Mine had a much thinner, more luxury-minded thing, so it's just unusual for me to see that. I also had digital instrumentation, while this one has the horizontal analog. You see just 35,000 miles on the clock. You got a fuel gauge. You've got the Riviera script. This is interesting. You see the PRNDL indicator with the overdrive, the D with the circle around it. One of the snowflakes at work actually asked me what that meant in another car. What is the D with the circle around it? I said, overdrive. And then I kind of realized that overdrive was it's not really a thing anymore. I mean, it was everywhere in the 80s and, even into the 90s. It was in movie titles. It was in music. It was in songs. It was in books. It was, overdrive was just kind of a thing. Shift my car into overdrive. It really meant nothing, but it was everywhere. And it's just gone. It's gone the way of the rotary telephone. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think new cars are being advertised as having overdrive. It's just something that's disappearing from the vernacular. You got a whole row of idiot lights on either side. Nice stuff. You've got your headlights here. You've got a tilt steering column. You've got your intermittent wipers, your cruise control. You've got Dolby noise reduction, auto reverse, Delco sound system. You've got this one has the analog air conditioning. Mine was digital. Down here you have an ashtray. Non-smoker car, so that was definitely not mine. You have this giant glove box door in here. This is the tool to work the wire wheel covers. You've got the it looks like the original owner's manual for the car. The wire wheel tool, well thumbed. Looks like this is going to be a build sheet of some kind. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's still with the car. And then you've got, the maintenance schedule and a letter from Buick about a recall campaign that everybody could die. So there it is, reference Buick owner. Nice bit of history with the car. And then you've got this odd little coin that seems to have come with it. Not sure what that's all about, but there you go. So fairly well equipped. And you also have a trunk release in there. This vertical dashboard, not what anyone would call ergonomic today, but, I think it has a very nice elegance to it, and of course matched what was at the Aldo at the time. Because there's no tranny hump, because it's front-wheel drive, there's no transmission hump running towards the back, so you get this almost flat floor, which really did give you a lovely amount of room. If you had, this 6-passenger car, if you had someone here sitting in the middle, they'd still have plenty of foot room because they don't have to straddle that thing. The T-Types did have a center console and sort of a tip of a hat to sportiness, but otherwise that was it. So, all right, look, let's fire this thing up and go for a drive. And again, the memories this gives me. Holy God. All right, the 307 faithfully fires up, as it always will. It's just that kind of an engine. Runs nice. It's got a quadrijet on there, I believe. I don't believe it's fuel injected because you have to kind of choke it and take it off choke. Nice and smooth. You got the column shifter here. I've got the wheel tilted down a little bit. Up ahead, you've got the Buick Riviera gun sight hood ornament leading the way. The nicely beveled hood, the little indicators for your headlights and taillights and that sort of thing. And also in the back, I don't know if you could see it up there where I'm hitting the... tells you your brake lights are working. GM's little... fiber optic thing, which is all very neat. And let me just tell you, man, what do we have on the radio? We got anything? Today's music ain't got the same soul. I like that old time. Yeah, well, that's kind of perfect, even if Billy Joel gets on my nerves sometimes. If there's a better driving 80s car, I really don't know what it is. I mean, this thing, and I can attest to this from, probably I owned it for 6 years, was the greatest cruiser in world history. Man, you just lay back, you just put your hand on the wheel. It's got over-assisted brakes, over-assisted steering. It is just a joy to drive this thing down the boulevard, and I can tell you, having driven this home last night, my memory didn't fail me. That is just a fact of this platform, this body style, and the way this car makes you feel. So I have a feeling Dalton's windshield is going to be shit. Let's see. We'll turn right here and find out. He's done worse, that's for sure. It definitely had missed it up a little bit this morning. Seems fine. It just soaks up the bumps. Try to get around these guys. It's, oh my God. I remember, again, being a delinquent kid, we would all meet in this parking lot, and I would drive over this row of parking blocks just to be an asshole. kind of thing you did back then. I was a kid. And, if I had tried that in my Firebird, I'd have left exhaust pieces and fenders on the parking lot ground. And the Riviera just did it. It just took it. It just, the suspension had huge travel, and it just soaked it up, man. Ah, that poor car. That poor car. God, do I owe it an apology. Horsepower, I want to say this thing had like 140. The T-types in their ultimate incarnation had like 180 or maybe a little bit more, the turbo. But they didn't have the V8 torque. Even with the low horsepower rating, that's actually pretty nice and a pretty good kick down. You get some quadrajet sound out of it. You can flip the cap on this thing and make the secondaries howl like a police car. And man, I am just on cloud 9. I am in heaven driving this car. If I had a place to store one, I would have to own one. I would absolutely have to own one. I may have to anyway. It was just funny, too. I mean, getting in a car that you owned decades ago and very quickly, like, when I had the lights on and I hit the high beams, I remember well that little square high beam indicator. When you start the car up and the ass end is down, you get a little car is leveling thing. I remembered that. In fact, we were camping out, me and some lunatic women I went to college with in the woods one time, and the car leveled itself when it sank on the air shocks, and we thought it was a bear. It scared the shit out of us. When you hit the turn signal, it has the most over-engineered, look at that, left turn abbreviated, right turn abbreviated. He was a bit silly. You don't know what's wrong with just arrows, but I guess that's part of that Riviera luxury that you get to have. So anyway, look, there it is. I'm not going to ramble on. In fact, I want to kill the camera so I can just really enjoy this drive. I don't know how much longer we're going to have this car, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It just takes me back to a time when I was still pretty fucking miserable, but not as much as I am now. So there it is, 1984 Buick Riviera. Personal luxury coupe. This one is for sale at Auto House of Naples, 35,000 miles. It's an absolute charmer, drives and feels as nice as the car when we got it from Sunshine Buick way back when. So anyone who ends up with this thing is going to be pretty chipper. And if you have an interest, you can call them 239-263-8500 on the web at autohousenaples.com. A lot more fun stuff coming up, more good cars. We're going to keep at it. Uncle Johnny's got a couple for us. His are always great. Andrew's probably going to come up with more shit later on. And all in all, it's just good times. It's good times. And after this weekend, my schedule tones down a little bit, which has been insane. So thank you for everything. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting. Again, you guys just keep me going, man. You really do. Without this little bit of fun in my life, oh my God, I'd be homicidal, absolutely homicidal. So times are good. Thank you very much, and we will see you with the next one. Take care.